The Garfield farm dispersal ran through a wet Tuesday in April, and by the time the auctioneer reached the waterfowl lot, the serious buyers had already loaded their wagons, and the remaining crowd had the particular quality of an audience that has gotten what it came for, and is staying only out of the vague curiosity that attaches to a sale's less promising conclusions. The lot was 47 ducks. The notation in the sale bill was brief and not flattering. Mixed runner stock, undersized, poor conformation in majority, laying history inconsistent, no pedigree documentation. They were a flock that Martin Garfield had assembled over several years without the systematic intention that produces a consistent result. Birds of mixed heritage and mixed quality, and the mixed outcome that mixed heritage and mixed quality reliably produce. What they shared, and what the sale bill's notation was communicating to anyone who read it with attention, was small size and a laying record that had not distinguished itself in a way that justified the effort of managing a duck flock over and above the simpler management of a conventional hen operation. Every practical buyer at the Garfield sale understood this. A duck that does not lay reliably is a feed cost without a return. A small duck that does not lay reliably is a smaller feed cost without a return, which is not an improvement that anyone with an operation to run found persuasive. Lena Marsh raised her hand. She was 39 years old, a woman who had operated the marsh holding on the southern edge of the Callaway County Valley for 6 years alone after her husband's departure, not death, departure, which the settlement had processed with the specific sympathy it reserved for circumstances that carried both grief and embarrassment, and that it therefore addressed by not addressing directly, leaving her with 14 acres, a sound farmhouse, a conventional hen flock of 22 birds, and the particular clarity of purpose that a woman develops when the alternatives to clarity are too costly to entertain. She paid $9.30 for 47 ducks, every last one. She arranged for them to be crated and transported to the marsh holding that afternoon and drove home in the rain with the specific composure of a woman who has made a decision she can defend and is not currently required to defend it to anyone. The men who remained at the Garfield sale said what men say. She had been hearing variations of it for 6 years and had developed, across those 6 years, the specific immunity that comes from understanding that the opinion of a person who has not examined the evidence is not the same category of thing as the evidence. The evidence in this case was in her kitchen, a letter she had received 3 weeks before from her cousin in the eastern settlements, a woman named Dorothea who had been running a small duck egg operation for 4 years and who had written not to recommend the enterprise as a general proposition, but to describe a specific observation she had made that Lena had read once and then read again and had been thinking about since. The observation was about duck eggs. Not about duck eggs as a category. Everyone who had encountered them knew that duck eggs were larger than hen eggs, richer in yolk, and carried the specific quality that made them preferred in baking over hen eggs for the same reason that cream was preferred over milk in the same context. This was known. What Dorothea had observed, and what her letter described in the specific terms of a woman who kept careful records, was that the market for duck eggs in her area was not competitive with the hen egg market. It was separate from it. The families who wanted duck eggs for baking, the households that produced the breads and pastries, and the specific preparations that duck eggs elevated in ways that hen eggs did not, were not the same families who purchased hen eggs for daily cooking. They were a distinct customer with a distinct use and a distinct willingness to pay, and that willingness to pay was higher than the hen egg market by a margin that Dorothea had documented across 4 years of selling both. Duck eggs did not compete with hen eggs. They served a different customer, and the customer they served was, in Dorothea's experience, loyal, not the casual purchaser of whatever was available and cheapest, but the specific purchaser who had learned what duck eggs did for their bread and was not interested in a substitute. Lena had read this observation and had done the arithmetic that it invited. The arithmetic had produced a number that justified $9.30 for 47 mixed-stock ducks with a poor laying record. Not because the laying record was good, because she had a reason to believe she could change it. She knew this the way a woman knows something she cannot yet prove, that a poor laying record is not always a genetic verdict. It is sometimes a management verdict, and management was something she understood. What she lacked was time to find out. The ducks were in the wagon. She spent the first week assessing. Not managing, assessing, which was the prior step that the Garfield operation had apparently skipped, and the skipping of which explained, at least in part, the inconsistent laying record that the sale bill had notated. What she found across the first week was not a flock of poor layers. It was a flock that had been managed as though it were a hen flock, which it was not, and that had been performing accordingly, which was inadequately. Ducks are not hens. This statement is so obvious as to appear trivial, but its implications for management are not trivial, and the Garfield operation had apparently received the obvious version without the implications. Ducks require water, not the small drinking vessel that adequately serves a hen, but the active, splashing, head-immersing water engagement that a duck uses for the maintenance of its feathering, its nasal passages, and the specific physical condition that a laying duck requires to produce consistently. A duck denied adequate water access produces less and less well, and the condition declines in a way that is slow enough to be mistaken for a genetic ceiling rather than a management deficit. The Garfield ducks had been maintained on the same waterers as the Garfield hens. This was the primary thing. Lena built a water yard in the first week, not a pond, which would have required excavation she could not undertake alone, but a series of 3 large wooden troughs fed from the pump at the back of the house, each one large enough for the active water engagement that a duck requires, and that a wooden trough, kept filled twice daily, could provide at the cost of the twice daily filling rather than the cost of the excavation. She watched the flock for the 3 days after the water yard was available. The change in behavior was immediate and not subtle. Ducks that had been standing in the ways of ducks that are not comfortable, the specific stillness of animals whose physical requirements are going unmet, became, within the first morning of access to adequate water, the ducks that ducks are when their requirements are met. They were different animals. She adjusted the feed. The standard hen feed mix that the Garfield operation had been using, grain-heavy, protein-moderate, was not the feed profile that a laying duck required. The duck's protein requirement for sustained laying was higher than the hen's, and the specific amino acid profile that duck egg production demanded was not well served by the grain mix that had been the flock's diet. She added dried fish meal to the grain, the same supplement that produced results in hen operations when winter laying was the goal. At the ratio she had worked out from the agricultural extension letter that accompanied Dorothea's correspondence. She added the free-range time in the wet areas of the property, where the ducks self-supplemented with the invertebrate protein that waterfowl find in soft ground and that no formulated feed fully replicated. She kept a ledger. By the end of May, the ledger was telling her something. The flock was not 47 ducks in the condition the Garfield sale had presented. It was 47 ducks in the condition that adequate water and adequate protein produced in animals whose underlying capacity had not been reached by the management that preceded her. The first eggs appeared in the 3rd week of May. Pale blue-green, larger than any hen egg she had ever collected, with the specific weight in the hand that speaks of a yolk-to-white ratio that baking instinct recognizes before the eye confirms it. She held the first one to the morning light the way her thumbnail shows her, not for its beauty, though it was beautiful, but for the information it carried. It had the quality of something that was going to sell itself. She was not ready. but the eggs were appearing daily now, and the flock's condition was improving in the measurable way of animals receiving what they require. And there were 4 weeks of May remaining before June made the question of the market urgent. What she lacked was a buyer who understood what they were buying. She was about to find one. She brought the first basket to the Callaway County market on the second Saturday in June. Not the full week's production. That was more than a first market appearance warranted, and she was not a woman who brought more than a first appearance needed. She brought 2 dozen eggs in a basket lined with the clean straw that presented the blue-green shells at their most immediate, the color that Dorothea's letter had mentioned as the detail that stopped buyers who did not know they were looking for duck eggs and made them look anyway. She set the basket on the table at her market position and waited. She did not announce. She did not call out. She did not wave. She had been at enough markets to understand that the appropriate behavior for a product that will speak for itself is to let it speak. It spoke within the first 20 minutes. A woman named Agnes Petty, who had been operating the most respected bakery in Callaway County from her kitchen for 11 years, and who came to the county market not to browse but to purchase specific items on a specific list, and who was not the kind of person who stopped for things that were not on the list, stopped. She stopped because the blue-green eggs were not on any list she had ever brought to a county market, because blue-green eggs had not been available at any county market she had attended in 11 years of attending them, and because a woman who has been baking seriously for 11 years in a community where duck eggs are not available has had 11 years to become aware of what duck eggs would do for her bread that hen eggs were not doing. She looked at the basket. She picked up one egg and held it in both hands the way bakers hold things, not for aesthetics but for weight, for the specific density of content that an experienced baker's hands can read before the shell is broken. She asked how many Lena had. Lena told her, 2 dozen today, more next week if the arrangement proved useful to both parties. Agnes asked the price. Lena told her. The price was higher than the hen egg price at the same market, not dramatically higher, higher in the specific way of a product that is a different thing from the alternative rather than a better version of the same thing. Agnes had not come to the market looking for a better hen egg. She had come and found something that was not in competition with the hen egg at all. She bought all 2 dozen. She asked Lena to hold the following week's production for her before setting up the market table. She told Lena she would tell 2 people. 2 people became 4 by the following Thursday. Word was still moving before the market day was over. She could feel it the way a person feels weather before the clouds arrive. By August, the waiting list was 11 accounts. This was a number that the arithmetic of 47 ducks and the production rate they were currently maintaining did not fully support, not at the volume each account required, not without the specific management choices that increased production required, and that she had been considering since the waiting list passed 6. She could add to the flock. Runner ducks of good laying stock were available from a breeder she had identified through the Agricultural Extension Office. A man 2 counties over who had been maintaining a dedicated laying line for 8 years, and whose production records, which he had been willing to share by post, showed the performance that a properly managed duck flock of consistent heritage produced at its best. This was not the Garfield flock's heritage. The Garfield flock was mixed and would produce mixed results indefinitely regardless of management improvement. What she had proven with the 47 was the market and the management method. What the expansion required was better genetics to apply the method to. She ordered 12 ducklings from the breeder in August. She did not announce this. She noted it in the ledger and confirmed the delivery arrangement and waited. The 12 arrived in September, small and yellow in the way of ducklings that have not yet become what they will become, and she managed them through the autumn with the attention that young stock requires, and that she had by now accumulated the specific knowledge to provide. a merchant named Owen Hatch, who operated the general store in the next settlement, and who had heard about the blue-green eggs through Agnes Petty's customers, and through the specific information velocity of a county market in which useful commercial news travels faster than ordinary conversation, came to the marsh holding on a Wednesday in September. He asked how many eggs a week she could supply on a standing basis. She told him the current production and the projected production after the 12 new birds reached laying age in the spring. She told him the price, the same price she had set at the market in June, which had remained constant because the demand had not exceeded it, and the demand exceeding it would not have changed it, because she was not a woman who revised her pricing based on what the situation would support as opposed to what the product was worth. He accepted the arrangement. He told her he expected to expand the order once the spring production increase came through. She said she would let him know when the capacity was available. The waiting list was 16 accounts by the end of September. She ran the ledger on the last evening of September with the careful attention she brought to every accounting, and what the ledger showed was a number she did not share with anyone, because it was not a number that required sharing. It was a private number, a settling number, the kind of number that means a farm that has been managed alone for 6 years through circumstances that did not simplify is now in a different position than it was in April. What she lacked was spring. What she had was 47 ducks producing at a level the Garfield operation had not reached, 12 ducklings growing toward their first laying season, a waiting list of 16 accounts, and a ledger that was saying something it had not been saying in April when she raised her hand for $9.30. Word was still moving through Callaway County. It had not stopped since Agnes Petty told 2 people. The spring brought the 12 new birds into production in the second week of April. She had been managing them since September with the attention to water, protein, and free-range access that the original flock's transformation had confirmed as the method, and what the spring produced was the result of a method applied from the beginning, rather than applied in correction of a prior management deficit birds at the peak of their first laying season, in the condition that the method produced when the method was all they had known. The eggs from the new birds were slightly larger than the existing flock's eggs. Not dramatically. The size difference was the difference between good management from the start and good management from correction, and that difference was measurable but not the story. The story was the production rate, which was running higher than the 47 had reached even at their best, because heritage matters in the way that genetics matters when the management is equivalent and the genetics are not. She held the first egg from the new birds to the morning light. The same quality, the same pale blue-green that had stopped Agnes Petty in June of the previous year, and that had not stopped producing its effect on the people who encountered it since. The specific color that Dorothea's letter had mentioned as the detail that worked in the market before the buyer knew why they were stopping. She allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she updated the ledger. Owen Hatch expanded the order in April, as he had said he would. The account he gave her for the spring quarter was 40% larger than the autumn arrangement. He had been asked at the store about the blue-green eggs more often than he had been asked about any other product he had stocked in the previous season, and the question people asked was consistent. What are they, and can I have more? He told them what they were. He told them where they came from. The men who had been at the Garfield dispersal sale in April of the previous year. The men who had remained after the serious buyers had left, and who had watched Lena raise her hand for $9.30, and had made the comments that the situation had seemed to invite, did not come to her gate in a group to revise their assessment. That was not how it worked, and she had not expected it to work that way. What came instead was Owen Hatch's expanded order and the county market waiting list, and the 2 families who had asked if they could purchase directly from the farm rather than through the store, and the specific regard that the Callaway County Valley gave to a farm operation that was producing something it had not had before and that it had discovered, in the course of a year, it wanted. She noticed most things. She had noticed, in Dorothea's letter, the observation about the duck-egg market being separate from the hen-egg market, the detail that most people receiving that letter would have filed as interesting and not acted on. She had noticed, in the Garfield flock's behavior during the first week of management, the difference between ducks that had been denied adequate water and ducks that had not, and had understood that what she was looking at was a management problem rather than a genetic ceiling. She had noticed, in the pale blue-green of the first egg held to the morning light, a quality that the county market had not encountered, and that Agnes Petty's baker's hands had recognized before her buyer's mind had processed it. She had not been lucky. The 47 runty ducks from the Garfield dispersal had been in that pen waiting for the person who understood what they were and what they had been denied, and what they would produce when the denial was corrected. She had been that person. She was, for the first time in the 6 years since she had begun the specific, daily, unhurried work of making the Marsh holding produce what she could see it was capable of producing, exactly where she had meant to be. Not finished. The spring flock needed the next season's planning, and Owen Hatch's expanded order needed to be met, and the 16 waiting accounts needed to be told when their supply would become available, and there was a breeder 2 counties over who had offered, in his last letter, to discuss the heritage lines that would best suit an operation building for the Callaway County market specifically. But placed correctly, on the right holding with the right birds, making the right product from what a dispersal sale had offered at $9.30 to the person who had read the right letter and done the right arithmetic, and understood that a poor laying record is not always a genetic verdict. Sometimes it is a management verdict. And management was something she knew how to change. Word was still moving through Callaway County. It had not stopped since the second Saturday in June, when a baker named Agnes Petty had stopped at a market table and picked up a blue-green egg in both hands and asked how many there were. There were more now. There would be more still.